All right, so let's go through each of the biomes. Let's start with the tropical rainforest, equatorial, subequatorial regions. Think about the jungle, South America, Central America. Temperature, pretty high. In other words, it's pretty hot in here, right? And a precipitation, a lot. And it doesn't vary seasonally, so very little seasonal variation. As you can see over here, there's going to be a lot of vertically layered, and competition for light is going to be intense because there's a lot of trees, there's a lot of vegetation. Vegetation is dense, uh, very diverse because there's a lot of rain, because it's very hot, there's a lot of vegetation, or there's a lot of plants. Therefore, it's going to have a high biodiversity. Um, Animals, the animals that live in this area are going to have to be animals that can also live in trees, right? Because there's a lot of trees in this area. So jaguars, sloths, lemurs. So if you look at this picture over here, you see that the tropical rainforests are mostly around this area of the planet. Uh, it's very leafy. It's very lots of plants, lots of trees. Therefore, it's going to be very rainy and very hot, right? And therefore, there's a lot of food, and therefore, there's going to be a lot of different types of um, organisms living in this area. The savanna, the savanna is also known as the tropical grasslands. Find them in Africa, South America, Northern Australia. Temperature ranges still kind of pretty hot, uh, but it's mostly like seasonal. Okay, precipitation is also seasonal, so sometimes there's going to be very wet seasons, but there's also an extensive dry season. And in these areas, there's tend to be a lot of fires, which is actually good because it, kind of lets more more grasses to be able to grow, or more plants be able to grow, and it's gonna uh, kind of be able to get rid of stuff that shouldn't be there. Uh, Makes nutrients, so the soil is kind of rich in nutrients. So fires are actually pretty good in this area. Relatively few trees, right? Do you see many trees here? No. But what do you get to see a lot of? A lot of grass. Okay. So there's a lot of grasses in this area. And if there's a lot of grass, there's going to be a lot of organisms that are going to be eating grass. We call these grazers. Okay, like wild bees, like zebras, like antelopes, right? And with those, you're gonna end up having also really big mammals, like for example, your lions and your cheetahs and hyenas, right? So um, we're talking, if you look at this picture, again, look at the area where the savannas are found, you see that, well, there's going to be a rain, but it's probably going to be seasonal. There's rain because there's grasses, but maybe not a lot of rain. That's why there's not a lot of trees, right? It's still kind of hot, but maybe not all year long. So that is going to be the savanna. Now, we're going to go to areas that are very dry, very little precipitation. And these are going to be the deserts. Again, around 30 degrees north or south of the equator, maybe very hot or maybe very cold. They're very cold at night, for example. Um, Precipitation, low. And that's really what determines a desert. There's not a lot of rain. And if there's not a lot of rain, look at my picture here. There's not a lot of plants. And if there's not a lot of plants, then there's going to be kind of a low species diversity. So again, low biodiversity in this area. So there's not like a lot of diversity in species. And because they live in the desert, okay, organisms need to have special adaptations. So organisms need to have special adaptations. So for example, plants, all right, are going to have deep roots, reduce foliage to reduce water loss, large, fleshy, water-storing stems. So cacti, for example, mesquite. And animals, well, animals in this area, they also need to have some kind of adaptations to be able to survive the real extreme temperatures, okay, of this area. So they, a lot of them do some burrowing. A lot of organisms are able to kind of come at night and look for food when it's not as hot. Uh, they may have really efficient kidneys because there's not a lot of water, so they cannot lose a lot of water. And we have a bunch of scorpions and ants and beetles and snakes, for example, and lizards. Okay, so if you think of the desert, and again, here's the deserts. See around those areas. Okay, uh, the deserts, low precipitation, so low rain, very little amount of rain, and so there's going to be fewer plants, and thus less biodiversity. All right, the next one is chaparral. And chaparral, it's not one of the most popular biomes, as you can see from the picture. There's probably rain, but not as much rain to sustain a lot of trees, but maybe a lot of shrubs. So whereas the chaparral is also known the Mediterranean kind of biome, which looks like the Mediterranean. So think about places in the Mediterranean, right? Like probably Greece and those places. Summers, also in California. There's chaparral in California. Summer is pretty hot. Winter, fall, spring, cooler. Okay. Precipitation, again, it's very seasonal. All right. Rainy winters, dry summers. That's why this is the type of vegetation that you get. So you get rain, but you don't get as much rain as a tropical rainforest, for example. Type of vegetation that you get. So you get rain, but you don't get as much rain as a tropical rainforest, for example. Dominated by shrubs, small trees. Okay, that means that probably more than grasses, but at least there's some shrubs as well, trees. Probably that rain enough rain to be able to sustain them. Things like vineyards and olives and figs grow pretty well in this area. Again, this area is also very adapted to fire because there's constant fires. Think of California. There's constant fires in California, and there's some droughts over there too. Animals include browsing mammals, insects, amphibians, small mammals, coyotes, jackrabbits, rabbits, mule deer, gray fox, etc. Okay, so that's a chaparral. And now, closer to us, we have the temperate grasslands. And again, the word grass, you find the word grass. That means that this area is going to have a lot of grass, which means that you're going to have a lot of grazers, organisms that like to eat grass. And you don't see a lot of trees, right? Almost no trees in this area. So it's kind of similar to the savanna. Um, Temperate grasslands, also known as prairies, as plains, mid latitudes, winters. This is kind of our area here. So winters, they're very cold, but summers are very hot. Precipitation ranges throughout the year, but it's seasonal. So precipitation is seasonal. Very few trees, if any. Dominant vegetation, grasses. Okay, so again, what kind of animals are gonna live here? Grazers. Okay, bison, for example, and wild horses. Okay, so that was the prairies and the plains, the grasslands. Another one is gonna be temperate broadleaf forest. And this one, again, is going to be around here in this area. Uh, Winters, cold winters, summers, hot and humid, kind of the similar latitude as the prairies, uh, the grasslands. So annual precipitation, um, it's also seasonal, depends by seasons. So a lot of rain, mostly all seasons. It's almost like spread around. There's snow in the winter, Dominant plants are going to be your deciduous trees, those that shed their leaves in the fall. Um, the ones that we see here all the time. Maple, oak, hickory. What kind of mammals live here? Or deer, raccoons. Um, a lot of the birds that live around this area, they tend to migrate to warmer areas. Okay, so that's a temperate broadleaf forest. Coniferous forests, even higher up, closer to the Arctic, uh, around this area. The largest of the biomes, okay, because it just covers a lot of area. Now, it depends where you're at, which continent. It's called coniferous forest, or it's called the boreal forest, or it's also called the taiga. Winters, I mean, you can look at this, right? What do you see? Cold. The first thing that you see is this place is gonna be pretty cold, probably a big part of the year. So winters are gonna be cold. Summers maybe warmish, warmish, not really hot, but warmish. Annual precipitations through, it's like between 30 and 70 centimeters, but a lot of it comes as snow. Okay, not a lot of trees, not a lot of vegetation, so it's gonna be low in species diversity. What kind of trees do you get to see here? Special ones called conifers. Okay, your pines, your spruce, your fir, your hemlock. What kind of organisms are gonna live here? Well, this is too cold for big parts of the year, right? So you want to have those mammals that hibernate, okay? And some of the birds are going to migrate. So moose, grizzly bears, wolves, red fox, all of those organisms make this their home. And then finally, we have the tundra. And the tundra is very, very, very cold. Uh, covers expansive areas of the Arctic. I don't know if you're able to see in my picture, but it's like around here. Two types of tundra. This is the tundra I'm talking about is this one. But there's also something called the alpine tundra because mountains can, they're some mountains are huge. So there's very high mountain tops, and at that part of the at the tip of the mountain top, there's a completely different environment. It's very very cold. Remember we talked about this in one of the videos that as elevation increases, it gets colder and colder and colder. So in the tundra, okay, the winters are probably cold, freezing, I would say. They're freezing cold. Summers, they're relatively cool, right? They're not warm, they're not hot, but it's nice enough to have some growth. Not a lot of precipitation, but a lot of snow. Again, because there's not a lot of vegetation, so it's going to be low in species diversity. What kind of vegetation do you see here? Some grasses, some mosses, some lichens, okay, some small shrubs, for example. So the growing season is great. It produces a lot of food for organisms, but it's very, very, very short. And one of the things about that you're probably noticing here is there's no trees, right? It's all kind of populated by, let me just say, small plants. Okay, so why? Because there's something called permafrost. Permafrost is a permanently frozen layer of soil, which restricts the growth and of plant roots. What kind of mammals live there or um, organisms live here? Musk oxen, caribou, reindeer, uh, wolves, bears, foxes. Migratory birds do come here and they nest in the summer. Okay. Why? Because well, there's a lot of food in the summer. In that little growing season that we see here, right? In that little growing season, there's a lot of food available and a lot of daylight. Okay, and kind of makes great for it's it makes for a great breeding grounds. Breeding grounds. Okay, and probably there's also fewer predators around this area. So those were the biomes. Again, when you're thinking about the biomes, think about how hot, how much rain, right? Which is going to determine what type of vegetation, grasses or big trees or trees that lose their leaves or trees that never lose their leaves, but they have special kind of adaptations to that area. Okay, so depending on the climate, we get a specific type of vegetation, which we get a different type of communities in terms of animals and other organisms.